In this module, we'll talk about inflection and derivation as different kinds of things that the morphology does in a language. One way of dividing up languages would be according to the number of morphemes that often appear in a single word. Isolating languages are languages where there's basically one morpheme in every word, so the morpheme to word ratio would be about 1. It's a 1-to-1 morpheme to word ratio. In these languages, there's no inflection, there's no derivation, only compounding. So Mandarin Chinese would be the classical example of this, but there's other ones like Khmer and Thai and Vietnamese. So the Chinese sentence ta zai zuo zuo ye would be he is ta, zai means progressive, like he's in the middle of doing something. Zuo is do, and zuo ye literally means do industry, but do industry actually is used in an idiomatic way, this compound, to do homework. So it would be like he is doing his homework. Ta zai zuo zuo ye. So basically, each of these morphemes is sort of one word. We do have this noun-noun compound, which makes another noun, but noun-noun compounds in these languages are basically the only types of morphological complexity we have. Otherwise, each morpheme is one word, and each word is just one morpheme. Synthetic languages would be more complex, languages that have multiple morphemes per word. So these languages would allow inflection and derivation and compounding. And there's two main types of these synthetic languages. A fusional language would be one where many different categories, many different pieces of meaning are actually fused into a single morpheme. Basically, the morpheme, a single morpheme, is expressing multiple ideas or multiple meanings at the same time. A great example of this would be the language Russian. So here I have this Russian phrase, Vizhu хорошего человека. And vizh is one morpheme, u, хорош is one, evo, человек is one morpheme, and a. So here, when I'm doing this morpheme representation with two slashes, the dots don't refer to syllables, the dots refer now to morpheme. So what's going on here? Vizh means see, but this u is doing lots of things at once. It's saying first person, that it's me who's doing it, and singular, there's only one of me, and present tense. But I can't divide the u, that part of this u is present tense and part of this is first person singular. No, u is doing all three of these things at once. Or хорошего, хорош is the morpheme which means good, and this yevo is saying, hey, it's a masculine object, and it's an accusative case, and it's an animate object, and it's singular. If these don't make any sense yet, we'll talk about this in a module coming up. But basically, this one morpheme, evo, is indicating all of this idea. It's communicating all of those meanings at once. All of these different ideas are fused into a single morpheme. Or человек, which means person, this a at the end of it is again fusing masculine, accusative, animate, and singular. So all of that information is being fused into the single morpheme. So these are, now you can see that I've got 3 words and 6 morphemes. So I've got like a 2-to-1 morpheme to word ratio. But that a lot of these functional morphemes are doing lots of things at once. Korean is another type of synthetic language, which would be agglutinative. This basically means that each category gets its own morpheme, or you could say that each morpheme is only communicating one meaning at a time. It's not doing multiple jobs, it's only doing a single job. So in this Korean phrase, 이해하셨습니다, this means I understood. And ihe would be understanding, he would be a verbalizer, making something into a verb, so like to do, understanding. The sh means that it's honor. This s marks the past tense. Ni marks politeness. And da means that it's a declaration. I'm just proclaiming that this thing is true. But the number of meanings being communicated is the exact same number as the number of morphemes. So even though this word is now made of many morphemes, so here I've got 6 morphemes in only one word. Each of the morphemes is doing its own job. This is one of the reasons why I have very complex morphology in Korean, because I have to add a single morpheme for each of these different ideas. Chinese and Japanese differ. Even though people think of Chinese and Japanese, or maybe lay people, as being related languages because they use some similar characters, they're very different in this way. Chinese is an analytic and isolating language. There's one symbol per word. And this basically communicates, we talked about that idea that each morpheme gets a symbol in Mandarin Chinese. So basically this sentence, 我爱只猫, I love that cat or this cat. Basically each morpheme is one word, each word is one morpheme, and these are color-coded here. Japanese, on the other hand, is an agglutinating language like Korean, that a single word can have lots of morphemes in it. Each word could have many different forms depending on the context or the occasion of its use, whereas in Chinese, each word will basically just have one form. Here, this would be watashi wa is this thing here. Watashi means the I. You can see there's a relationship here. Wa is kind of a topic marker, like as for me. Kono is this, neko, cat, and then this o is the object. It marks the object. And then ai shite. I would be love, and then shite would be sort of like the past tense form. So you can see that you can recognize that there's some relationship here between these characters, but what Japanese has done, they've had to add a lot of squiggles, a lot of symbols to it, because Japanese words are made of more than one morpheme. This is the morpheme cat, this is the morpheme object, this is the morpheme I, this is the morpheme, it's the topic marker. This is the morpheme for love, and then this is information about the tense. When was this being done? What kind of statement am I making? An extreme example of these very complex languages would be what we call polysynthetic languages. This would be where basically an entire sentence is all done via morphemes. So something that would have to be many different words in a language like Chinese or even a language like English or Japanese can be only a single word in these languages because all of the ideas are just morphemes. So Chukchi is a language spoken in northern Siberia, right across from Alaska. This would be the part of Russia that Sarah Palin would have been able to see from her house. The Mengelevt Bachtarkan is basically made of a lot of morphemes. The morpheme t means first person singular subject, like it is I who is doing something. Meng means great. Levt means head. Pucht means hurt. And rkan means present tense. And then these little schwas in between are basically just there to break up these consonant clusters. Tmeng, levt, pecht, rkan has too many consonants. So tmeng, levt, pecht, rkan. By putting these schwas in here, it kind of splits them up. So first person subject, great head hurt, present tense. As for me, great head hurting happens in the present. This is basically a way of communicating that idea, I have a fierce headache. But in Chukchi, these are all done by morphemes that are put together into a single word. This verb morphology, so t is actually a verb prefix. It appears with an adjective and a noun, great and a head, in between the verb root itself, which is pucht. This would be the root for this word. And then the prefix, which indicates who's doing the hurting, who's doing the puchting. I've got great and head. This would be something like, I brown dog sit, and brown dog sit would be a single verb in English, which would mean something like to watch a brown dog. It would be all written as one word if English was a language that worked like this. Okay, so we've seen that there's languages that have one morpheme per word, or maybe 2 or 3 morphemes per word, but each of those extra morphemes are doing more than one job. You have languages that have multiple morphemes per word, and each morpheme does one job. And then you have these crazy languages where basically an entire sentence would all be one word because everything is just a morpheme. Well, let's think about what do these little morphemes that attach to a root do. There's basically 2 types of them. There's inflectional morphemes versus derivational morphemes. So inflectional morphemes always preserve the category of a word. So if it attaches to a noun, the end result will also be a noun. If it attaches to a verb, the end result will also be a verb. If it attaches to an adjective, the end result would also be an adjective. They don't add any new content. They don't substantively change the meaning of a word. I'm not really creating a new meaning. I'm just making the word agree with the context in which it's uttered. I'm making the word match for the occasion of who's doing this thing or what was the situation for it. So let's think of this root in English, dodge, a verb, to dodge something. I can add some pieces to it. It will change the category of the word. If I put an E on the end, dodge to dodgy, this is kind of a dodgy restaurant, or that was a dodgy answer to the question. I've basically moved from a verb to an adjective. I moved from the action to a sort of a suspiciousness or a skepticalness. Now I've really substantively changed the content. This is a totally different kind of meaning. And you can also see I've changed the category from a verb to an adjective. Or dodginess, the act of being dodgy. By putting this ness, I've changed the adjective dodgy now into a noun. And this is a very different meaning. It's a very different kind of word. If I accidentally left off this morpheme, if I said dodge instead of dodgy, it would really, really confuse people. These are called derivational morphemes. Inflectional morphemes, on the other hand, are ones that just match, make something passively agree with something else that's already in the sentence, that's already in the context. So I dodged the ball, he dodges the ball, we dodge the ball. So this is here, it's a verb and a verb. I'm just inflecting for person. Who is doing this? First person dodge or third person dodge? If I say he dodged the ball, it doesn't confuse people. It wouldn't change the meaning or interfere with the meaning in the same way that a derivational one would. Or if I have a car, think of Dodge being the car company. I have one Dodge or I have two Dodges. I have one Dodge in my driveway, I have two Dodge in my driveway. Yeah, it would strike you as a little bit weird, but it doesn't really change the meaning. You would get what I want to say. This plural S is just passively making it agree for number. I have one Dodge, and then if I've got more than one Dodge, I need this plural S here. These last two are cases of inflection. It's inflecting for person or inflecting for number, where here E or ness are derivational morphemes that significantly change the meaning of the word. It's a new kind of movie that I have in my head. It's a new meaning I'm trying to convey. So some examples of derivations would be these green morphemes here. They take the black root and they derive a brand new word with a very different kind of meaning. Payment is a very different thing than pay. Spiteful is a very different thing than spite. Often these will change the category of a word. So something like just would be adjective and justly would be an adverb. Pay is a verb, payment is a noun. Spite is a noun, spiteful would be an adjective. But some of them actually preserve the category. Disobey, obey is a verb, disobey is also a verb, but it's a very different verb. It's a very different movie or scenario in the head. Treat is a verb, mistreat is also a verb, but it's very different. Mature is an adjective, premature is also an adjective, but it's very different. I'm significantly changing the content. So as we saw, derivational morphemes can change the category of a word. Dork plus ify, I can make a new verb, dorkify. I'm going to dorkify something. Or I might even be able to add nothing and convert this noun into a verb. Like, I'm going to dork this thing up. You may not like it, but English does in general accept it when you take a noun and you put the to in front of it to turn it into a verb. Nouns can become adjectives by adding a derivational morpheme. Dork can become dorky. Dorkify, the verb that we created, if I add an ick, I could turn it into an adjective again, like dorkific, maybe. Obviously, this doesn't exist, but it could. I could take an adjective and turn it into a verb. I have this adjective dorky, which I created, and I could maybe verb this by adding eyes, to dork eyes something. Actually, I like dorkify better than to dork eyes. And this actually illustrates the fact that derivational morphemes tend to be really picky. It's often unpredictable which derivational morphemes will attach to which roots. A verb, dorkify, could become a noun by adding ation. So dorkify and ation could be dorkification, something like desertification. I could take our adjective dorky and turn it into a different kind of noun by adding tude. Dorkitude, maybe your dorkitude astounds me. So basically, English is a great example of a language that puts these derivational morphemes to good use, that it convert verbs into different kinds of nouns, nouns into different kinds of adjectives, adjectives into different kinds of verbs. We can basically do all of these sorts of conversion between the parts of speech by means of derivational morphemes. Arabic is an extreme example of a language that relies on derivation. So there's basically in Arabic one root, kutb, and this root, kutb, means to write. And we can actually, by adding all different kinds of vowels in between those letters or adding different things to the front or to the end, I can make all of these different derivations that derive very different meanings, which are clearly related to this idea of to write, but add new significant pieces of information. Kitaba, writing, katib, writer, maktab, office. so the place where writing is done. Maktaba, library, a bigger place where writing is done. Maktub, the thing which is written by someone. Miktab, the thing which is used to write something, means typewriter. Kutubi, the person who does the products of that verb. Kataba, he wrote. Kataba would be writing back and forth. Aktaba, so caused to be written. Ikhtataba would be something like caused the self to be written down. Takataba would be a reciprocal writing, like a writing back and forth over time. Inkataba and then iktataba. So basically I'm adding all kinds of morphemes into the middle and the beginning and the end of just that single root of kataba, and the combination of that is creating all of these brand new meanings. This is extreme derivation. As a summary, what's the difference between an inflectional morpheme and a derivational morpheme? An inflectional morpheme will always preserve the category. A noun after an inflectional morpheme will add is always going to remain a noun. A verb will always remain a verb. Derivational morphemes can be category changing, like a verb could become a noun or an adjective could become a verb. They can also be category preserving, but in this case, a noun would become a totally different kind of noun. King would become kingdom. King is one noun. A kingdom would be a totally different kind of noun, which is derived from that noun. Inflectional morphemes passively agree with the context. If it's a plural person doing the verb, then the verb has to agree in number with the subject. Whereas derivational morpheme is an active choice on the part of the speakers to add or to convey a brand new meaning. If an inflectional morpheme is missing or if it's wrong, the meaning is still understood. It's still understandable. I have 2 cookies. You understood what I said, even though I maybe should have said I have 2 cookies. But derivational morpheme, when it's missing or wrong, the meaning is totally different. If I say I'm going to play this, that's very different than if I say I'm going to replay this. That movie is a little dork, that's going to be a very different meaning than that movie is a little bit dorky. The missing derivational morpheme would convey a totally different meaning, and derivational morphemes actually attach to the root first, and then inflectional morphemes only get attached after all of the derivational morphemes have been attached. They're added to the root last.